Welcome to the beginning of the second half of the 50 Shades of Horror. I'm your host, Roommate. Today's movie is American Psycho, and here's where you can find it available for streaming. While this movie was released in the year 2000, it depicts 1987. In New York City, Patrick Bateman works a real cushy job in one of the Twin Towers. Patrick's a different type of protagonist for us, as he kills a lot of people.
I want to stab you to death, then play around with your blood.
It's strange, because Patrick isn't in much danger throughout the story. He is the danger.
We're not through yet.
He can't jump out of the shadows for us because we're with him the whole time.
Hello?
Though it's still plenty creepy getting inside his head as he stalks and subdues his victims. We get to understand Patrick as he shares his inner thoughts with us throughout the movie.
I feel lethal, on the verge of frenzy.
Thoroughly narcissistic, he explains to us how he maintains his perfect predatory visage.
Then I apply an herb mint facial mask, which I leave on for 10 minutes.
Though he confronts anyone he wants, being the predator doesn't save him from existential dread. And while we don't respect him, we can still mirror his response to some of the creepiness.
Yeah.
This is a movie that is just stacked with amazing scenes, making its 100 minutes breeze by.
And therefore more satisfying in a narrower way.
The driving force of the plot is that Bateman expects that he'll be caught for his murders. The face that is given to this antagonistic force is Investigator Kimball. So the scenes that have the most narrative weight are these polite encounters with a PI. Which brings me to the one thing that is at the center of American Psycho, how people see Patrick.
But is it possible to reserve a table for 2 at 8 or 8:30 perhaps?
When a colleague of his goes missing, he's scrutinized as a possible guilty party. And of course, he's 100% responsible for Paul Allen's disappearance.
Hey, Paul!
So he should have no alibi for where he was while he killed Paul, but it turns out he does.
According to his date book, he had dinner with Marcus Halberstram.
And?
I questioned him, and he denies it.
Where was Marcus?
He was at Atlantis with Craig McDermott, Frederick Dibble, and you.
Right, yeah, of course.
Patrick may think that he's exceptional, but he's interchangeable, struggling to be recognized.
Let's do it, Marcus. Great party.
Thanks. Patrick, why is he calling you Marcus?
His motivation for killing Paul was due to Patrick being mistaken for Marcus.
Alan has mistaken me for this dickhead, Marcus. It seemed logical because Marcus does the same exact thing I do. Marcus and I even go to the same barber, although I have a slightly better haircut.
And that very same slight to Patrick's ego is his saving grace when it comes to Kimball's conclusion. If he stands out at all, Patrick is considered the lamest and corniest one of his clique.
Oh, I forgot. Bateman's dating someone from the ACLU.
It's the voice of reason. Boy next door.
All of these guys feel the pressure to conform, but none of them is as obsessed with it as Patrick. He sands away personal traits, hoping that he'll be seen as relatable to everyone. You can see this in his apartment, which is so stark and barren, flawless, but with no character. His speeches are similarly sterile, hitting every buzzword to appear perfectly civil.
Stop terrorism. We have to provide food for the homeless and promote civil rights while also promoting equal rights for women.
His pursuit of being the exemplary modern gentleman is so aggressive and phony. He ends up being perceived as dorky and insecure since he's so desperate for approval.
That loser Patrick Bateman, what a dork. Another martini, Paul.
And this assessment of him is accurate. The fact it throws people off is incidental. Patrick really is the pathetic nobody that craves to be seen, but he's forgettable.
Bateman is such a dork, such a boring, spineless lightweight.
He and all of his peers are disposable, seen by how insignificant Paul's disappearance is. When Bryce goes missing for a few weeks, his absence is hardly acknowledged, let alone felt. So while all of these guys fail at being the cool center of attention, Patrick is failing the worst. But while watching the movie, it's easy to overlook Patrick's diminutive social stature. This is due in no small part to Christian Bale's charisma and his great sense of humor in the role.
Have a holly jolly Christmas.
Making Patrick be somewhat charming may seem counterproductive, but there's a logic to it. We are seeing this world from Patrick's point of view, and so we see him as he sees himself. I would bet Patrick is actually less composed and impressive than he appears on screen. If this was someone else's story, I think that we'd see his imperfections, the cracks in his facade. He sees himself as a paragon of the modern man, repressing his flaws so we don't see them. This helps the movie tremendously. We need to like watching him since we're with him so much. He's a guy who was so jealous of his coworker's business card that he kills this poor man and his dog. That despicability should make him intolerable, but the setup is a laugh riot.
I can't believe that Bryce prefers Van Patten's card to mine.
The business card scene shows how funny it is when the characters take the trivial seriously.
The tasteful thickness of it. Oh my god, it even has a watermark.
And while we might laugh, it does subtly nudge us into sympathizing with Patrick's desire to be seen. Though disturbed by the lengths he goes to get it, we're encouraged to think he deserves some praise.
I'll put on an ice pack while doing my stomach crunches. I can do 1,000 now.
You might even conclude that if he received some accolades, he might not turn to violence. But his recognition is impossible, and that points to the true terror lurking in the story. Patrick Bateman may be the killer, but he actually doesn't want to get away with it.
You're my lawyer, so I think you should know I've killed a lot of people. I'm not sure I'm gonna get away with it this time.
He wants to be caught. He wants to be hated, because then people will know and respect his pain.
My pain is constant and sharp. I want my pain to be inflicted on others. I want no one to escape.
This competitive corporate world leaves people without friends, family, or even identity. It destroys personal connections, implying they pale in comparison to fame and fortune.
I just want a child.
But of course, commercial enterprise has never been about achieving harmony. If people were ever satisfied, they'd lose the insecurities that keep them spending money.
I don't want you to get drunk, but that's a very fine Chardonnay. You're not drinking.
So these men are pushed so hard to succeed, only to find their journey to the top is endless. They believe that one day, they'll rise up through the ranks and become Donald Trump, and they'll be loved by all.
Is that Ivana Trump? Jeez, Patrick. Marcus. Why would Ivana be at Texarkana?
But there's never enough room at the top, and so they'll continue to languish in obscurity. This reminds me of a proverb that goes, "The fool who persists in his folly will become wise." It means that by failing utterly and completely, your mistake makes the lesson easy to learn. If you were to temper your mistake, salvaging it slightly, the lesson wouldn't be as apparent. Patrick is the fool who persists in his folly. No one falls flat going for that goal as hard as him. And since he buys into this rat race even more than his colleagues, his futility crushes him. His attempt to be caught is almost noble, since it would expose how empty all of these men are.
Personality consists of a chick with a little hard body, who will satisfy all sexual demands without being too slutty about things, and who will keep her dumb fucking mouth shut.
But instead we meet the actual monster in the narrative, societal indifference. Understandably, many people leave the movie questioning how real the violence was. The landlord of Paul's apartment and Patrick's attorney act as if nothing heinous has happened.
Bateman killing Allen and the escort girls, that's fabulous. That's rich.
It seems impossible that such a flagrant display of violence, with confession, could be ignored. But you have to ask, how much would it cost them if they were to acknowledge the carnage? The expensive apartment was used as a torture chamber? Just think of the lost property value.
There is a moment of sheer panic when I realize that Paul's apartment overlooks the park, and is obviously more expensive than mine.
A client who admits to being a serial killer? Who wants a lawyer with that on their record? Both of these people will only work to improve their bottom line, and justice isn't known for paying well. By making both of these characters on the older side, the movie implies this has happened before. This isn't their first rodeo, and so they know to leave these stones unturned to continue moving up. Patrick doesn't feel human anymore, but he's still shocked by average people matching his callousness. It's surreal to him that this world lets him get away with murder. That's why his reality feels false. His crimes appear fantastical not because they aren't real, but because they shouldn't be real. Patrick knows that this doesn't feel right, that the ugliness inside him shouldn't be everywhere, but it is.
Eerie.
The stretched reality is not the big reveal at the movie's end, but it highlights the reveal. By isolating people to pit them against each other, materialism conquers humanity.
We have to promote general social concern. unless materialism can help people.
Patrick can't escape its influence, even though he's willing to stand up for all his transgressions. No matter what he does, the gears of enterprise will continue grinding away at all of their souls. Compassion is not profitable, so those that succeed renounce it on their way up the ladder.
Would you like to hear the specials?
Not if you want to keep your spleen.
Anyone in a position of authority must be comfortable with others' suffering. And that terrifying truth is what makes American Psycho such an important movie. It shows us the appeal of this lifestyle from someone immersed in it, as well as its toll.
How thought-provoking.
And it manages to provoke all these thoughts while being so much fun. Ain't horror movies great? My recommendation for another review this week is from Jack's Movie Reviews. This channel is full of succinct and thoughtful video essays on movies, though it's currently retired. He'll look at one facet to a film. For this one, it's how the image controls the individual. In this clip, Jack explains what effect the economic boom of the 80s had on society.
Along with this extreme economic growth came scandals, thievery, and a decline in morality, with sex and drugs being intertwined with multi-million and sometimes billion-dollar companies. A lot of this mentality came from yuppie investors.
So go check out his Patrick Bateman character study. The link's in the description. Shamble back here next Saturday for 1985's Return of the Living Dead. Here's where you can stream this movie about how tasty brains are. Be ready for next week. You think this is just a fucking challenge? This is a way of life.